Charles, I've been reflecting on our tireless efforts in ministry, and I must confess, at times, I feel incredibly fatigued. The constant travel, preaching, and guidance weigh heavily.
John, your words resonate with me deeply. The fervor with which we spread our message and compose hymns is indeed exhausting, both spiritually and physically.
Yes, the passion we share for our work is unwavering, but I fear that without respite, we risk diminishing the very fire that drives us.
Valid concern, brother. We often speak of God's grace and care of his flock, but perhaps we neglect to apply those principles to ourselves.
Indeed, Charles. It's crucial that we find balance. Our mission is important, but we must also heed the needs of our own spirits and bodies.
Perhaps we should set aside more time for prayer and personal reflection, away from the demands of our ministry, to replenish our souls and seek guidance.
A wise suggestion. Even in our quest to serve others, we must remember the importance of caring for ourselves. Our effectiveness as leaders partly lies in our own well-being.
Let us then make a conscious effort to find moments of rest and rejuvenation. Our work is a marathon, not a sprint, and we must pace ourselves accordingly.
Agreed, brother. It's in these quieter moments that we might also find new inspiration and strength to continue our God-given tasks with renewed vigor.
Aye, aye.
Aye, aye, Captain. Welcome to another episode of Rebrand, the podcast that explores the challenges and triumphs of a personal and professional reinvention. I'm your co-host, Tim, and that there is the other guy called Ben.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into a topic that resonates with many in our audience, burnout in ministry.
Ministry is a calling, a deeply rewarding vocation that often comes with its own set of unique pressures. Today, we're shedding light on the crucial issue of burnout among pastors and other ministry leaders, exploring practical tips and insights that not only apply to those in ministry, but to anyone navigating the delicate balance of purpose and well-being.
We'll be sharing stories of resilience, discussing the importance of setting realistic expectations, and uncovering strategies for maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Whether you're a pastor seeking renewal, or someone supporting a friend in ministry, or someone in any type of leadership position, this episode is packed with valuable insights to help you navigate the challenging terrain of burnout.
So grab your headphones and join us as we embark on a journey to rediscover purpose, redefine boundaries, and reignite the passion for a fulfilling life in ministry. This is Rebrand. Let's dive in. Okay, that was two intros, two top-notch intros, one after the other. This episode is indeed all about burnout. We all experience it. If you haven't, let us know your secrets, because I think it's just something everybody deals with. But, I mean, it's certainly something the two of us deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we'd talk about it, share some ideas that we have heard or maybe come up with ourselves on how to address burnout, especially in ministry.
Absolutely. I have been serving in ministry since the ripe old age of 18.
Whoa.
I started in youth ministry 1995, so 28 years. And it's been fun.
Yeah. I started in ministry also when I was 18. However, that was a few years more recent than your 18.
Not many.
But yeah, I mean, it's true. And I think I've through different seasons and different roles and capacities, some more ministry oriented, some more support oriented, and some in between.
Yeah.
And burnout is real across all of those.
Oh man, absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially, I think, in this new world of always being connected and especially in ministry, always needing to be available to people, whether you think you should be or not. People expect you to be available to them 24/7.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about and not only do we run into where people expect us to be available, but sometimes we put that expectation on ourselves
Absolutely.
too much. Probably we put the expectation on ourselves more than what other people do. But if you're like me, if you say no to something, sometimes you feel like you are letting everyone down. And that's not necessarily the case, especially if saying yes when you should say no makes you give not your very best.
Yeah. I'm an Enneagram 3, which is the performer or the achiever. And we have some other threes in the office who we have a bit of a support group, an informal support group. But I share with them, and I've shared with you also, like, if my schedule, if my calendar, which I live by, like my iCal, doesn't have a direct conflict for something someone is asking, then I have this like innate, like I can't say no. Right? Like if I don't have a direct conflict, the answer has to be yes. Otherwise, I'm like letting them and myself and the world down.
Absolutely. I do the same thing. The other thing that I find myself doing is even when I will schedule time for me to work on projects that I want to work on or creative projects, something that is outside of a meeting that is taking place with other people. So if I'm working on a solo type project and someone asks me to do something, instead of me saying no, I typically set my project aside, go and immediately help them, which can sometimes put me behind on the things that I need to be doing.
Yes. Which when you're doing creative work is so detrimental because, I mean, I get into this all the time. Tim and I met yesterday to try to reset some of my calendar, some of my scheduling, because I get pulled in all these directions, or I pull myself in all these different directions. And so I'm bouncing from thing to thing so much that I don't have big blocks of time to do creative work,
right? Which
kills your creativity, kills your efficiency doing creative tasks because it takes so long to get in the right zone to do that. And it's so easy to sacrifice that time for things that other people are asking of you.
Yes, absolutely. I was telling you that my creative time, I have found that I am most creative beginning around 2 p.m. And going up till about 8 p.m. or so. And early on in my ministry career, so I would sit down to begin writing sermons. And whether I was starting with the theological piece or starting with the creative, the story narrative piece, I would just have enough time to begin to get the juices flowing and start typing and get in a groove. And I would look down on my watch and I'd be like, oh, I got to go pick up the kids. And that pattern, even though my kids have grown and they're out of the house, that pattern, I created it, and it seems to continue on. It seems that I find myself walking away from those creative times in order to do something that could hold off or something that I should wait on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go through, we've assembled a list of some different tips for avoiding burnout or combating burnout in times. So we're going to highlight a few of them. We'll have more on our website. If you didn't know, a little fun fact for every episode of the pod, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever, or you're watching the video on our website or on YouTube, every episode has a blog that goes along with it on our website at rebrandpodcast.com. So go check that out for even more tips here from this list. But we're going to highlight, if we have time, I think we have 6 to highlight. We may not get to them all, but what's the first one that you want to highlight from this list?
I think the biggest thing to help avoid burnout, or a lot of times we don't avoid burnout. We find ourselves in the midst of burnout, which is very, very dangerous. But to help us, the obvious choice is get away, right?
Yeah.
Take a break, whether that is a 15, 20-minute, hour, a day break, or it's time for a vacation. Just get away and let your mind kind of reset, let it de-stress, and focus on other things.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said, I don't take credit for this. I've heard this from many others, some preemptive getting away. Because, it's scriptural. It's the cup runneth over, right? You can't fill up other people if your cup is already empty.
Yep.
And so if we're living in this, I'm doing a bad job of paraphrasing. John Mark Comer. Wait.
Uh-oh.
This book right here. This is actually I should have started with this. This book is all about combating burnout. John Mark Comer has a great book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Check it out. Not a sponsor.
Yet.
Hey, John Mark, hit me up. Oh boy, that's a mess. But he talks all about like you can't you have to operate from a place that is full.
Mm-hmm.
And so your rest or your Sabbath, he talks a lot about Sabbath. Your Sabbath is not about refilling, it's not about recovering, it's about preparing.
Yeah.
And so it's, you're not getting to 0 and then filling back up. You're starting at 100 and then you're losing some, but you're never hitting 0, right? Yeah. So it's not scarcity, it's abundance. It's all very scriptural, right?
So if we put a different metaphor in there, let's say we're driving someplace.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, instead of waiting until that gas light pops on that says, hey, you can only go for a couple more miles before I just shut down.
Sure.
You're saying let's pull in and gas up.
Yeah. Got to gas up. Absolutely. All right. Another one, set realistic expectations. I think this is important. So I think your context should dictate your expectations. So if I'm doing something new that I've never done before, it may not be a knockout of the park every time, the first time.
Yeah.
Set your expectations so that you can meet them. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly disappointed with your performance. I run into that all the time. My expectations sometimes are based off of other people's performance. And I'm measuring myself versus what I've seen from others. Okay,
give me an example of that. What do you mean by that?
So, in video production, we'll say, if I base my editing, my cinematography off of the most successful YouTube cinematographers, or off of a Hollywood production, obviously I'm going to fall short. For one thing, they have a team of 20, 50, 100, 500 people, and another like that. That's also the best of their best, right?
Yep.
If I set my expectations externally and off of some unrealistic goal, I'm going to disappoint myself.
Yeah.
And nothing will lead to burnout faster than not meeting your own expectations.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Absolutely. I think the other thing there is that ability to say no, whether you're saying no to someone else in order to give your best to the project that you're working on, or you're saying no to that in the moment you walk away from your project to do whatever, whether that is, hey, I'm going to check a few emails. And we all know that when we get into the bloody email syndrome, that it just keeps going on and on and on and on. Or we see that notification pop up for the Instagram reel that I shared with Ben, and he goes and he looks at that, replies, haha, yeah, that was funny, Tim, and then finds himself 3 hours later.
It's true. That does happen often. Yeah.
So that ability to say no is important, no matter how hard it is and who you're talking to, whether it's yourself or others.
Yeah. I think that segues well into our next one, which was establish boundaries.
Yeah.
And so a big part of that is saying no, but it's also, this is where my responsibility ends and yours picks up.
Yeah.
I think that's big. Or this is the time that I have. I mean, even if I'm bargaining with myself, this is the time that I can dedicate to this.
Yeah.
And once I hit that line, I stop.
Yeah.
It's time for some rest. It's time for some recharge. Yeah. What else? What's another one?
Another thing about boundaries, as you're talking about that, is the whole work life work-play balance as well. And sometimes it's super easy for our boundaries to slip and allow one thing to be super heavy. And for me, I find myself all the time being late for dinner, meeting my wife for something, because I just want to get this one last email done, or I just want to get this one last thing finished. And that's unhealthy too, because when home life, whatever that looks like for people, when home life is bad, it's going to reflect on work life as well.
Yeah.
And so finding a way to set a balance and boundaries to say, like you were saying, when I'm done, I need to be done. But that also means when I get out to go play, I go play and I leave work behind. I think another thing in ministry that we struggle with so much is that even when we're at play or on vacation or on a break, because of being connected, like you were talking about earlier, we've always got work on our mind because that notification pops up and it's like, oh man, I forgot to do that, or this needs to be done right away. And even when you say it'll just take 5 or 10 minutes, that's not true. It may be 5 or 10 minutes for you to respond to something, but the next 2 or 3 hours, while it's still on your mind and you're not present with family or friends or whatever, you're still off skewed on that work play balance. So,
and I think it probably goes both ways. So if I'm not setting good boundaries or having a good structure in my agenda, then I find myself, especially now, like hybrid work from home, where my 8-hour day, the idea of a 9 to 5, it just like that's not how I work. Yeah, for better or for worse, and maybe it is for worse. I don't know, but the reality of that is the time that I am spending at doing work sometimes isn't the most quality time that I could be giving to my work. Yep. Because I stretch it out over more time, and I'm bouncing between work and home, or I'm multitasking, or whatever. I think especially now, as so many people are working hybrid or working fully remote, the quality of the time that we're giving to work has decreased because we're stretching it out. Yeah. So one of the goals that I have in the coming months, in the coming season, is to either be in work mode or home mode. Yeah. Or even more specifically, to be in like creative work mode, like administrative work mode, or personal mode. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's an important part to think about, because in ministry, like any other job, not very many of us decided that we wanted to go into ministry so we could fill out forms for the annual conference or for the general church or whatever. But it is something that has to be done. And setting specific blocks of time to work on those areas. Yeah. Whether it's let's work on it to get it out of the way, or let's work on it because I am so passionate about this. It's important to do that. Yeah. Another thing, that and this is moving into the next one, you and I talked about creating those blocks on our schedules and making sure we create that creative time and we stick to it. We have our meeting time, we have our administrative time, we have our time off. But it's one thing to put it on the calendar. It's one thing to look at it and see it, and it's another thing to actually do it. And so you and I made a pact to say, hey, I'll hold you accountable to that. Yep. When I see that on your calendar, I'm going to make sure that you're doing that, or at least ask you about it and hold you accountable. So that kind of goes into the next one, which is cultivate a support system. Yeah, and I'm excited about this one. It's what you said. I think there's some accountability there, but it's also if you have people around you who are excited by the same things that you are, or another way, who are fed or whose cup is filled by the same things, right? Then that forces you to, I don't know if it forces you, but that you can lean on them when you are feeling a little empty.
Absolutely.
And just being around the people who are excited by the same things, chances are you're not both going to be running on empty at the same time.
Yep.
And so you can kind of take a little bit of energy from them. Yeah, I mean it's infectious, right? So earlier this week, I was in Nashville for a new communicators orientation for the UMC. I'm 2 years into the job, but scheduling and whatever reasons, we haven't had it for the last couple of years. So anyone who had started in the last 3 years was at this orientation. Right. And it was actually so life-giving, so kind of exciting and inspiring, because we were all doing similar work, not the same, and there was actually a lot of diversity in our responsibilities. But so many of us were excited about the same things, and also sometimes struggling with the same things. And being around those people was really exciting, because I got to hear what new things they were doing, what exciting things they were experimenting with, or projects they had finished and were proud of, or that they were excited about looking into and trying. And so I came back with all these, like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And just that excitement in the newness of what other people are doing, some inspiration, that can be huge in kind of pushing back some of the burnout that's always kind of pressing there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that the conference is really beginning to focus on. And we've dropped terms on the podcast. You've probably seen it at annual conference, but all these passionate spiritual things that we're doing. We've got passionate spiritual disciples, passionate spiritual leaders, passionate spiritual congregations, passionate spiritual groups. And one of the things that links all of these together is that connection and relationship and support system. We refer to it as accountability, and sometimes that can get a bad name, a bad rap. Sometimes it's like, well, you're just forcing me to do something, but it truly can be life-giving, like what you're talking about, like what you and I are talking about with the calendar, just making sure, hey, I know this is something that you want to do. I also know it's a change in life, and change in life can be hard. And they say, whatever, it takes 40 days, 50 days of doing the same thing kind of over and over to form a new habit, whatever the time frame is. Yeah. But having someone there just to kind of cheer you on and also remind you that, hey, I know this is tough, is something else on top of what you just said about the life-giving energy that you can get because you're around your people that are going through similar or the same things as you.
Yeah.
Another way to get energy is what?
Continue learning. And I would actually amend that. I might say continue learning and experimenting.
Okay.
So like it's continued ed, but it's also just trying new stuff and growing. And I think I kind of, maybe I moved into that with what I was saying about the last week that I spent in Nashville. But just trying new things, especially like for me, I'm the kind of person who I don't like to stay still very often. I don't, if I'm doing the same thing for too long, I get bored pretty quickly. And boredom, burnout, they're, those are right there.
They really are. Yeah.
Maybe they're synonyms, like they're right there. So I think learning new things, new techniques, if the work that you're doing is technique driven, learning new resources, learning new history, learning new theology, I don't know, learning new best practices, all of these things can just kind of reinvigorate what you're doing.
Yeah.
And experimenting and moving in new directions and trying new things can do that too. I think looking for a reason to be excited about what you're doing.
Yes.
Right?
I think something you said there just really, really clicked with me, and I hadn't thought about it this way, with burnout and boredom. And how many times are we burned out because all we're thinking about are those maybe not menial, but I'm going to say menial tasks that we have no desire to do, that maybe we've put them off. and they've stacked up, and it's like, I'm never going to get through with this, and I hate it. I don't like it, and it's keeping us from doing what we're passionate about. Well, one way to reverse that is put it on hold if you can.
Sure.
And do something that you're passionate about. Whether that's serving, whether that is doing something from a continuing education standpoint, hanging out with that support system, whatever it may be, you're right. Just moving your mindset from this one area that seems to be overwhelming into a life-giving, creative, more passionate area can really help save you from burnout, but also kind of reverse the effects of burnout.
I'm going to drop a bombshell here. This podcast, it's not about you. It's not about the listener. It's not really about the viewer. Rebrand this podcast was birthed out of Tim and I maybe being a little bored or realizing that we didn't have enough life-giving work that we were doing, and we wanted something where we got to just do new stuff. We got to talk about whatever was on our mind. We got to lean into the type of work that excited us at the time. And so, I'll be honest, there's not a whole ton of consistency in this podcast.
What?
We're kind of all over the place.
We're constantly rebranding is what we're doing.
That's it. It is. And that works out perfectly. It's a good excuse. Because really what we're doing is talking about what's exciting to us at the time.
Yeah.
And for me, I won't speak for the both of us. For me, the podcast has been a great way to combat burnout because it's just fun. It's not taxing, really. I mean, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to prepare an episode, to record an episode, to edit, to upload, to write, to communicate about. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's all kind of like fun, life-giving stuff. It's not taxing work. So, I think part of maybe a tip that I would have is find something like that for you that, whether it is time consuming or not, is not the issue, but that is life-giving for you, that you enjoy doing, that excites you. So that you're always going to have to do the stuff that doesn't totally excite you.
Sure.
No job is 100% fun every time. That's just not how it works. But find some aspect of your job, find some aspect of your ministry that excites you. Yeah. And maybe that change, it may not be the same thing forever. That will probably evolve. For me, it certainly does, because I jump from thing to thing all the time.
I get that. And I was actually thinking about that as you were talking. And, one of the things I don't think we do very well, or I don't do very well, is to reflect on that for just a moment, because I'm like you. If something begins to bore me, or if I get stressed or overwhelmed, the things that I used to be passionate about, I find myself maybe not passionate about it anymore. And I'm wondering, and I'm just word vomiting right now, is that because I'm so overwhelmed that I feel like I'm taking away from the things that have to get done for something that I actually love to do? And so I say, well, I'm just kind of over that. Instead of just taking a moment and processing and thinking, okay, what was it that gave me life from that? And why isn't it giving me life anymore? Is it something that's with me? Is it that I've outgrown it and I want to do something different, or what?
Yeah.
So I think another thing that's not necessarily in our list is just having some self-reflection time to talk about, or to process what's going on. Sometimes that's hard to do in the moment, because we're just done. We're just over it. That's where a support system can come in to remind you, hey, what's going on? Why are you feeling this way?
Yeah.
Another portion of that we need to think about, especially in ministry, is reflect on our own personal spiritual journey.
Yeah.
I find for me, maybe not everyone, but I find for me that's what goes the quickest.
Absolutely.
I can fill that time with so many other things, and all it does is hurts my relationship with God, which in turn makes me wonder, what in the world am I doing in ministry anyway?
Yep.
And so finding ways to focus back on those spiritual practices and those spiritual disciplines. And for me, my covenant group that I've talked about a few times on here has been the thing that helps keep me grounded, because each week we meet and we talk about our spiritual journey, how we're doing attending church, how we're doing in giving, how we're doing in serving, how we're doing in reading, how we're doing in praying, how we're doing in just recognizing God in the moment. And knowing each week that I'm going to be sharing that reminds me that, well, I can either go in and say, well, I didn't do anything, or I can be a part of it and have my life enriched.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the more stressed I get, or maybe the more burnout I'm feeling, the more anxiety I get. And that puts me in this place that's like, I have to be efficient. I have to be effective. I have to be, I'm running out of time. And so I need to do the things that I need to use my time as effectively as possible. And then somehow that leads to, like, in a spare moment of time that I have, rather than like leaning into my spiritual practices, which I know in my head are life-giving.
Yeah.
I end up doing things like scrolling through Instagram, which is not life-giving, watching TikToks or watching Netflix. None of those things are life-giving, but somehow I get in this like anxious place where I'm just so wired that I need something, or I feel like I need something to just zone out.
Yeah.
But that's not going to help the problem, right? That's just going to avoid addressing the burnout or the anxiety, where leaning into my spiritual practices in those times is, maybe that's the only way that's really going to start to dig out of that hole.
Yeah.
Here we go. That's something that, this is going to be a good segue. That's something that I've talked about with my counselor, which leads to our next point: seek professional help.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
That is something that scares a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think things are getting better than what they were maybe 5 and 10 years ago when we talk about mental health I think things are getting better than what they were maybe 5 or 10 years ago when we think about seeing a therapist or seeing a counselor.
The stigma's not as strong.
It's not as strong, but it's still out there. Sure. And sometimes people can feel like they've failed if they're seeing a professional on something. But man, if we could just look at it like we do any other ailment or illness, if your feet are hurting so bad that you can't walk, you're going to go see a foot doctor, and the foot doctor is going to help you heal and get better. If we could just do that with our stress, our anxiety, the mental things that go on, and recognize that this is just another way for us to heal, I think we would be in a much, much better place.
Yeah. If I get to a point where my anxiety is bad enough that the people around me can see an effect in my, in the quality of my work, or in the efficiency of my work, like that's a problem.
Yeah.
Or somebody will come into my office and say, "Hey Ben, how are you doing?" And I say, "Oh, I'm good." And they say, "No, you're not. How are you doing?" If they can see that I'm not really doing okay, like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it's so that those moments are the hardest time for me. Those moments of weakness are when it is hardest for me to admit that I need help.
Yeah. Yep.
And so if I have that built in, if I already have a relationship with the counselor or with the therapist, then I don't have to I don't have to make that jump
Yep.
when I'm at my weakest. When am feeling strong in my mental capacity, in my mental health, then I can start to put those structures in place so that when I am at my weak times, they're already there. I can lean on that.
So am I hearing you say, even though you may not be feeling depressed, you may not be feeling anxious, you may not be feeling stressed, which if you're in ministry, I don't know if that ever exists, but hey, we'll say if you're in a good place, now may be the time to go ahead and find a counselor, find a therapist, and start those conversations?
So much of the work that you can do, not that I'm an expert here, okay, this is just my opinion and my experience. So much of the work that you can do with the therapist is preparing yourself, giving yourself tools to address stress or anxiety or whatever it is that you struggle with, giving you the tools to address those things when they come up, not if they come up, when they come up, so that it's not a crisis.
Yeah.
Right? Giving your tools to address the things that are happening in your life so that you don't have these big, massive swings in your mental health, so that when you start to see yourself slipping into a place of anxiety, you have the tools, you have the structure to pull yourself up before it gets too difficult.
Yeah. If we only had something in Holston Conference that we could turn to that could help us, whether it be a one-on-one or someone to say, hey, I know someone else in your area that could help out. Wouldn't that just be incredible?
Like a center.
Yeah, maybe for well-being or something
like in Holston specifically.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a Holston Center for Well-Being.
That's brilliant.
We just came up with a great idea.
I think you should make that happen.
You know what? I'm going to call my friend Kathy Hustis and say, Kathy Hustis, licensed clinical social worker, do you want to be the director of the Holston Center for Wellness?
Do it.
Spoiler, she already is. Wow. Thank you to Kathy Hustis and the Holston Center for Wellness for sponsoring this episode.
Well-being.
For sponsoring this episode. Just
unbeknownst to you.
We'll be calling.
That's right. That's right. That'll cost you absolutely nothing. Kathy is available. We've got information on holston.org under the clergy services tab. And what's so cool is it's not just for our clergy, but it's for our clergy families. This is a service that is provided. And Kathy I don't want to speak for her, but she's a person that can meet with you virtually. She can meet with you in person, but she can also, if you're not close to the Knoxville area, she has the ability to recommend other people in your area that can help out. So it's a great service that's offered through the Holston Conference, and something
to clergy families, also to conference staff and district staff.
That's right. That's right. It's something that we should be taking advantage of in a better way.
Absolutely. All right, that is all the ones that we are going to highlight here in the episode, but I think we have at least 3, maybe a 4th that will be included on the blog, so go check that out. rebrandpodcast.com. You don't want to miss it. It's some good stuff. Tim, bring us home.
Well, in the great words of John Wesley.
Heard of him.
And Charles Wesley.
Yep.
I don't know what they said.
May your hearts be ever strangely warmed. Go in peace.